It's 7:01. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. Our first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance, and I would recognize the Deputy First Selectman.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, madam. All members of the Board of Selectmen are present. Our next order of business is the approval of our meeting minutes from January 7th. Are there any corrections?
Jason, I don't have a correction, but I have a question on item 9B on page 6, involving the additional information on the veterans exemptions you were going to look into.
Oh.
I don't see it on the agenda. I just don't want to lose it in the shuffle.
Hold on a second. Page 6.
Paragraph.
Yeah, I have not lost that. I just haven't circled back with Josh yet. That's in my to-do list.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. That's all I got.
Yep, we're still fine.
All right.
Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I'll move we approve the regular meeting minutes of January 7th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Marie D'Souza will second those.
Any further discussion or corrections? Seeing none. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
And Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Is there any public participation? This is one of the public's 2 opportunities to discuss items with the board. I recognize you at this point. I think there's only 2 members of the public actually on. Seeing none, we'll give you another opportunity later in the meeting. Communications. In your packet, you'll see the letter that was sent to Raytheon pertaining to the Broadbrook Mill. I think this was as discussed with you folks last time, but it was transmitted. It is a communication, so I just wanted to make sure you had a copy of that. We don't have any resignations. We don't have any reappointments. We do have 2 new appointments. First is Ian Neal as a member of the American Heritage River Commission. The second is Lynn Stanley as a member of the Economic Development Commission.
Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I move to appoint Ian Neal to the American Heritage River Commission as a regular member for a term expiring November 1st, 2024.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to appoint Lynn Stanley to the Economic Development Commission, regular member for a term expiring January 1, 2024.
Is there a second?
Good? Yep. Okay. Thank you for waiting. Appreciate it.
No, seeing no second, the motion dies. Next is 9A, the establishment of negotiating teams for 3 bargaining unit contracts. There are 3 that will be up in July 1 of 2021. We've received demands to negotiate from 2 of them and will receive a demand to negotiate within the next 30 days or so from the 3rd. So those contracts that are coming due are the believe it or not, the dispatcher's contract, which we just settled, the clerical contract, and the supervisor's contract. No, I think that Charlie and Sarah certainly are up in the batting order here. Do you guys have a preference? So in terms of time commitments, I think as a guess, total guess, my guess is that the dispatchers will be the shortest to resolve because it's recently resolved. I mean, that's going to be a relatively easy lift. Clerical would probably be next, and I think the supervisors will be the most complicated because that's one of only 2 bargaining units that we haven't also addressed the pension language changes for. So with that in mind, I think it makes the most sense for Alan to sit on the supervisor's contract because he's also on the pension board, and there's a nexus there that seems to make some sense to me. Any thoughts about that, or any dibs that any interest on the other 2 that you guys have?
Jason, there's no conflict of interest with me being liaison of police doing the dispatch, right?
No.
Because I'd be more than happy to do that one.
Thank you for asking. There is no conflict. There's no personal or financial implication there for you. In fact, it probably would add to that conversation. So I'd be more than happy to have you join us for that.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm fine doing clerical.
So, and Alan, I volunteered you.
I heard that, yes, I'd be happy to, yeah.
So Marie just did her due diligence on the last dispatchers one, which we ratified last week. So she gets a break. Could I have a motion to appoint you 3 to the individual contract teams?
I'll make a motion to appoint for the dispatchers negotiations, Charlie Nodell; for clerical negotiations, Sarah Muska; and for the supervisor negotiations, Alan Baker.
Is there a second?
Sarah Muscat, Selectmen, I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. Selectman Baker? Selectman Baker votes in the affirmative. Selectman Nordell?
Aye.
Selectman Muska?
Aye.
And Selectman D'Souza?
Were you not hearing me? Can you hear me?
We are now. Well, your first word doesn't catch, so if it's just a one-word sentence, it seems to be holding out a little bit. Next, I'd like to reintroduce to the board Ruth Ann Calabrese, our zoning enforcement officer. Ruth has been working on some car dealership enforcement actions. This comes to us at the request of Selectman Nordell initially and of Fire Marshal Austin. Ruth has been making some progress on that and wanted to give an update to the Board of Selectmen. So Ruth, I'll turn that over to you. I think you have a presentation you want to share, right?
Well, let me see if I have that up. There was a, not so much a presentation, but just that spreadsheet of the 50 establishments in town.
I have that if you don't. I do.
Yeah, if you could share it, that would be great.
Give me just 1 second here.
Mhm.
I want to get it all on one page. Let's see how this works and still be visible. I think you'll be able to see this. Clear?
Yep.
Okay. So
Okay.
Ruth, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So I kicked off this program to do a sweep, basically, of car dealerships and repair shops in town. And just to get started, this list is an extract from the assessor's database. So she pulled the categories out for me. And that was my starting point to send out a mailing to all 50 establishments, alerting them to the fact that the program was going to kick off. And I had been asked to do this, and I would be looking for some particular items just to help them out and let them know that the issues at hand are really overcrowded lots where there are more vehicles than their site plan approval allows for, and cars being displayed in DOT rights of way or on landscaped areas, accumulation of junk vehicles or vehicle parts and accessories and non-compliant signage, just to help to get some voluntary action before I came out and did inspections, kind of put them on alert. And already we've had some folks call in looking for their site plans. You know, driving through town, I've noted that there are a couple of locations that have really cleaned up their lots, you know, moved some cars around and started to clean up. So that's encouraging. The table itself is color coded in that the yellow section is what I'm reviewing right now. It's a large parcel with several different businesses on it at that 200 South Main Street area. The two in green have already received notices of violation letters from me, and that was prior to the kickoff letter going out. And then there are some other shaded areas. Those are locations I need to look into. They were not included on the DMV list. So that could, a license list, it could mean they don't have a license, or it could mean the business no longer exists in town and that our own database could use some updating. So I'm still working that one through. I cross-checked with today the list that I had from DMV, and it was the same database that I cross-referenced to get these outliers. And there was also a handful that were licensed but not on our list, so there's a cross-check going the other way as well. So I'm going to tighten up that list. I'm prioritizing with the most unsightly or egregious looking locations, as well as those identified or prioritized by the fire marshal. And that's about it. We're underway, and I'm going to take them in chunks because it's an awful lot to try and approach it all in one big bite. So I'm going at like five establishments at a time. So, any questions from folks?
Charlie, I'll give you first bite at the apple if you'd like it.
Sure. Selectman Nordell here. So this is great. I did, however, and I guess it's just probably a difference of, because I think I had gotten it figured out, because there was one dealership where I was like, oh, I don't see Christie's on here, for example. And so then I started looking at the addresses and I'm like, oh, this must be it here. It's just under a different name than what they advertise or are registered with the state as. So, hopefully we have them all. And it sounds like you do because you've cross-checked and double cross-checked.
Right.
So I'm guessing you have them all. It's just that the names don't seem to all jive with
Right.
what their sign says versus, what's here on the list. And yeah, I've seen, I agree with you. The ones you have in yellow, because I drive down Route 5 at least every other day, and I would have to agree. The ones in yellow have a ton of cars. Like you can't even drive a car into their lot because they are so tight. Let alone a fire truck or an emergency vehicle if need be, if there was an incident there. So this is good that this is getting done because I really believe that it's a hazard both to our first responders, but also to, people who work here and maybe doing business with them as well. So it's great. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Other questions or comments for Ruth?
Jason, Marie.
Yep.
Just in response to Charlie's comment about Christie's, so that our person isn't out there looking for them. She sold, and they're now going to be called Trusted Auto. She's now joined her husband over at Erickson Enfield. So she's no longer the owner of Christie. So that's why that name is probably not on the list, but Trusted is there.
Mhm.
And I just I spoke to excuse me. to her earlier this afternoon on some questions that I had, and she was kind enough to clarify some things for me, but it turns out that it was my computer that's messed up. So I was able to print out with the right colors, so I'm good. So thank you for your help this afternoon.
Mhm.
All I got.
Ruth, I want to just thank you for your work on this. When we brought you on board, the actual inspection component had really been lacking. And that's something that we all, I think, had identified needed to be tuned up a bit. I think you've done a great job kind of just building the plane as you're flying it here. And it's great to see the product of your efforts, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other
Agreed.
questions, comments for Ruth? Ruth, thanks for joining us tonight, and I'm sure we'll see you. Actually, I know we'll see you soon.
You will. All righty. Thank you.
I got a text from Mike D'Amato that he's currently tied up. So what I'd like to do is postpone agenda item 9C and take up 9D, which is Terry Hahn. Let her do her presentation, and then we'll come back to Mike when she wraps up. So could I have a motion to postpone 9C and take up 9D?
Selectman Nordell will motion to postpone new business 9C and move on to 9D, Terry Hahn and the lot of PC land planners presentation.
Is there a second?
Sarah Muska, Selectmen, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, Selectman Baker. Selectman Baker votes yes. Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Great. Terry, thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Excellent. I do have a presentation, if it's okay to share the screen.
Yeah, that should be all set. So give it a whirl.
Yep, okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Terry Hahn from LADA PC Land Planners. This is a presentation for Warehouse Point, Planning for Stormwater Management and Village Center Redevelopment Grant, which we've been calling the Warehouse Point Planning Study. The project is funded by a Responsible Growth and Transit-Oriented Development Grant from the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, or the DECD. And this is the end of this grant, essentially. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with the study, just some basics. What parts of Warehouse Point are included in the study? Essentially, it's from north on the town of Enfield. The west side is the Connecticut River, and then the south and east sides are Interstate 91. So it's all the land within that area. Why is this project happening and why is it important? This originally started because the moving of the train station in Windsor Locks from south of 91 to up into the downtown area on the north side of town puts Warehouse Point within the 1/2 mile and 3/4 mile walkability zone, even though it's across the bridge, but it's still part of the transit-oriented development associated with that train station. When we also add in the, at the time, the casino, which was approved for the old movie theater site, Warehouse Point then became sandwiched between these two potential development generators. In addition, Warehouse Point, with its attractive architecture, its grocery store, the fact that it's relatively flat and walkable with great access to interchanges to 91, centrally located, and it's got river views. You know, Warehouse Point is got a lot going for it. And part of the plan from back in 2016 and the Plan of Conservation and Development really focused on Warehouse Point. And that was the justification for this particular grant. And so we started the grant back in 2018. From 2018 through almost 2020, it was really studying about the blue ditch which I'll get into with for a second if you don't know where the blue ditch is, and looking at the existing conditions in Warehouse Point in order to figure out what's going on, where the potential development opportunities are. And the existing conditions report was submitted in March of 2019 through to May of 2019. We started the second phase of public participation for the project in the summer of 2019. Obviously the project got delayed due to COVID, and the final public participation elements occurred in December of 2020 with a final information meeting December 29th, 2020 with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Final draft report was submitted in January, and the next version is on my desk waiting for me to hit the button to send it over to Planning and Zoning for their meeting on January 26th, which is next week. So hopefully at that point we'll be finished with the project. Okay, so this is me. I set this slide up because one of the things that we did do in this project, as part of this project, was to develop a 4-part video series. Because of COVID, we couldn't have any big public meetings, so we set up a survey that we put together and mailed out to all the residents. But once we put the survey together, we realized that we need a lot of background information. So there is an actual 4-part video series, tried to be as PBS as possible, and set up so that, and those are, I believe, still active on the town website if people are interested. Has a lot more detail and specifics about each of the parts of the project, stormwater and planning. We also prepared a paper survey and an online survey and was sent to all property owners and within the study area. We sent out over 250 surveys. We got 45 paper copies back, 2 phone calls, 6 online responses. Unfortunately, the online thing that had some technical difficulties, and so we didn't get a lot of responses online, but we did get a lot of paper copies back, which was really nice. We had a number of surveys returned. I'm going to write those up and give those to the tax assessors because we use the assessors information for the mailing labels, and hopefully they're not having the same problem that we did where the post office just sent them back. On the survey responses, it was about 50-50 men and women. There were obviously 80+% consider themselves either property owners or homeowners, and the rest were residents and businesses. The online survey got us access to residents of East Windsor, but not Warehouse Point. And we did have one participant who was neither. Our survey results, which I'd like to share with you, because some of those things are not necessarily, some of the things that come up here are not planning questions, but they may be more Board of Selectmen issues. The overall age of respondents was 60 some odd percent plus is 55 and older. So one of the things that we're finding is that the people who responded who live in Warehouse Point have been there for a significant amount of time. It's an older population and they have occupied their buildings for some time. So what that ultimately means is that starts as a planner to represent a demographic that is clearly committed to Warehouse Point, but it also represents a potential turnover in approximately 10 to 15 years of property owners. That is important to understand what that might mean for Warehouse Point, which is another reason why this planning study is timely. Obviously, because these went to residents and to homeowners and property owners, virtually everyone lives in town, in the study area. They shop there regularly. A small portion of them work, but mostly either because of their age, they were retired already, or they work elsewhere. They visit Warehouse Point every day, 75% visit every day, and which is different from the 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development group, where that was closer to 20% who go to Warehouse Point on a regular basis. So clearly the people who live in Warehouse Point spend time in Warehouse Point. That supports the supposition that one of the things that we were looking for potentially, and the Planning and Zoning Commission was in favor of, is adding additional residential units or the opportunity to have additional residential units in Warehouse Point in order to support the existing businesses. Every respondent indicated that Warehouse Point was important to them. I mean, you know, there were no responses that said it was not important. Whether it was very important or somewhat important, there was a difference there, but every respondent said that it was important. That doesn't usually happen. One of the things that was very interesting, this is a transit-oriented development grant, and so the train station and the proximity of the train station is important from a planning perspective, but overall, I think the Warehouse Point residents aren't quite connected to the train. They were asked a series of questions. One of them was, is access to the train station important to you? Virtually 50% indicate that it didn't really apply. They don't have anything to do with the train. And of that, only 25% said yes, and 25% just outright said no. So you're looking at a relatively small portion of the population that is connected to the train station now. I mean, this is not really a surprise because the train station, you know, because it goes Hartford to Springfield and it only does a limited area. Most people live somewhere other than on the train line. And in Connecticut, we're not quite set up to be able to have fingers leaving those train lines in order to accommodate where people really want to go. The other thing that residents were asked was, would you take the train to work? And here it reinforces that previous supposition, which is only 10% agreed. Everybody else clearly said, it wasn't even maybe, it was no, it was not going to happen. When asked whether or not a typical transit-oriented development theory, which is that the more you have access to transit, the less you need your car, we have a resounding 80% of respondents saying that they would not give up their car and take the train for virtually any reason at all. So the connection between Warehouse Point and the train station obviously hasn't sort of seeped in, but then again, the train station hasn't moved yet. So it's a little hard to see where that might go in the future. A couple of questions that came from the survey, just throwing out so that in case you have feedback, you'll know where some of these things came from. Somebody wanted to know who was paying for it. They were concerned that tax dollars was going towards this study, but that was not the case. They also want to know why we're doing it. And one of the things, just to remind everyone, the conversation regarding Warehouse Point actually started back in 2015 in the studies put together for the Plan of Conservation and Development, and which also started even before that in 2014 on a residence study that indicated that Warehouse Point and Broadbrook were the areas where people wanted to see more of a village life. And Warehouse Point in particular seemed better primed to be able to do that. Some of the, again, the survey results, respondents were asked, what do you consider to be the best aspect of Warehouse Point? Small town feeling, the Connecticut River access so that you could walk to the stores. If you live in Warehouse Point, you can walk to the grocery store. And that was a big draw, very popular response. Access to 91, the local stores and the local services. Most villages or downtown areas are desperate for a grocery store, and Warehouse Point has one. It's a very, very big selling point, certainly from a planning perspective. One of the things that came out of the survey, which had not been brought up really in previous discussions, was about the historic buildings. And the survey really sort of tapped into something that we hadn't quite anticipated, this level of consistency, which is over 80% of the respondents indicate that the historic buildings and the historic architecture, the build to lines, and the overall streetscape components as to how the architecture fits in were very important to people, and that they wanted to make sure that those were reused and restored and or renovated into something new. But essentially, if new things come in those properties, they want to make sure that those buildings are integrated into that new development, not just torn down. You'll notice in the survey, people were able to comment. And so the few people that disagreed, they mostly felt that the question meant that what that meant was that you were going to tear something down and reuse it. So that was not what they were interested in. It's always nice when you have a question in a survey that everybody agrees with. And as I mentioned before about the grocery store, the question was, is the grocery store important to Warehouse Point? And 99% of the respondents agreed. 2 people said that they had no comment. So one of the things that the study has done is that we looked at a site plan to expand Geisler's Plaza uses, how that might be done. One of the things about Geisler's Plaza is that the current zoning doesn't allow them to do a lot of expansion. So we looked at how the regulations might be modified to support growth for Mainfish, Geisler's, and some of the existing businesses on Bridge Street. Providing incentives in the proposed zoning to support existing uses, but provide for some level of new growth, and to particularly maintain the existing build-to line or the building line on the street. One of the things that's very clear from the surveys, both in 2016 and 2020, is that people like the architecture in Warehouse Point. They like the residential look. They like the style. It's all essentially 1910 architecture, from colonial to federal to Victorian, and people like it. So that's what the style that they like to see for future growth. Now, one of the things that we did ask is, what do you consider the least appealing aspect of Warehouse Point? We got a couple of responses that we had not gotten back in 2016. There was multiple people who mentioned, and this is the term that they used, not me, was that they were concerned about some of the blighted buildings that were in Warehouse Point that don't appear to have been or are being taken care of properly. They were very concerned about that. There's also, I think, perhaps as a byproduct of COVID, people are walking around on the streets in Warehouse Point more, but there seems to be a feeling that there's a potential homelessness issue in Warehouse Point, and some drug-related concerns that some of the parents mentioned. Traffic, especially on South Water Street, became an issue. Also, there was sort of mixed feelings about traffic on Main Street. Truck traffic on Bridge Street was mentioned on a number of times. Some people felt that they weren't safe walking, but one of the things that came up throughout the studies over the years is that there were not enough to do for shopping. Then the other items were all sort of individual things relative to the fire alarm, fire taxes, and other concerns on a townwide basis rather than specifically Warehouse Point. So one of the things that we're asked is, what would encourage you to visit Warehouse Point more often? And mostly everybody was talking about coffee shops, restaurants, more small businesses. But one of the things that we did get a lot of comments about was to develop the riverfront, a walkway along the river, and to improve the blighted properties. And as a byproduct of that, to have better sidewalks, more extended sidewalks, and to be able to walk all the way up to Route 5 and further down Main Street, also walking on South Water Street. One of the comments that came out of the survey and questions was, are you taking my house away? And so we tried to explain that this was a planning study. Even if the ideas presented here are implemented, nobody's required to do any of these things. These are for future development opportunities, they don't mandate any kind of change that would occur related to taking people's houses. One of the questions that came up was, is this project just for Bridge Street? The answer to that is no. We actually looked at the entire study area, developed new future use areas, and ultimately what will be a zoning map for this, a new zoning map with a draft zoning regulation for the entire area. So the next phase was to look at what Warehouse Point should become, which would be tied into a zoning map. The survey, people made certain recommendations. They wanted to see more shops, but not necessarily shopping plazas. They wanted more streetscape, a little bit more pavement, places to gather. Outdoor dining was a big one, which is not really a surprise given COVID, but nevertheless is something to consider. They want to make sure that the existing stores, Geisler's and Main Fish in particular, were not impacted by whatever happens. But my conversations, especially with the Geisler's folks, was that the critical mass of having additional stores in the area would be a benefit rather than negative. They were interested in trying to find a way to help people update their historic homes. How do you make that happen? A facade improvement program, some sort of a loan program, something to make sure that those structures don't fall into extreme disrepair, and therefore the consequence of that is that they would need to be removed in order to have new development. Of course, we also had 10% of respondents who felt that Warehouse Point is just perfect the way that it is and that there should be no change. So what do residents want Warehouse Point to become? Really the words that have come out through all this is vibrant, exciting, someplace you want to go, someplace you want to live, is walkable and connected. And two questions were asked, one in the positive and one in the negative, which is that 58% would like to see new development in Warehouse Point. And even more people do not feel that having no change is an option. So it was answered both in the positive and negative in the survey. Just to clarify, in this particular image, you see a circle here, over here, on the pavement, right at the intersection of the bridge and South and North Water Streets. That is not the roundabout or rotary that have been talked about a number of times. It's just an impression of the town seal put onto the pavement, which is something that DOT is allowing towns to do these days on a regular basis. One of the interesting things is, although from a planning perspective, we've been interested in adding additional residential components into Warehouse Point, the residents are a little bit skeptical as to whether or not this is a good idea. And for the most part, they were definitely interested in, they could see some more single family homes. They were all in favor of that, but they were definitely not in favor of apartments. I would note that this response was very much so age dependent, so that the older residents were much more likely to oppose apartments than the younger residents were. The other thing is we have sort of a general lack of confidence that anybody really wants to start a business in Warehouse Point. So, you know, new development and new stores, people were concerned that that would not be something that they could see going forward. And we only had 17% of people interested, could see either themselves or someone else starting a business in Warehouse Point. Of course, it was also COVID. So there are a number of reasons why that could be. As I mentioned in the streetscape, definitely a lot of interest in having more outdoor dining on Bridge Street and a little bit on Main Street. Everything should be walkable from the street and between the businesses, so you can park in one area and walk to multiple destinations. Maintain the historic buildings, consider a bike lane, and really look at uses that are dog and family friendly. So in other words, if we're going to walk around, we're going to walk around all together. Couple things that came up in terms of needing to address now is there's a number of sidewalk, especially on Main Street, that needs to look at some repair. You got a lot of movement over time. Traffic is consistently perceived to be an issue. And there was some question as to whether or not, especially on our big snow events, how do you deal with the pedestrian sidewalk and also the amount of snow that comes from the DOT plows. One of the things that we looked at was what to do about future sidewalks and bike lanes. A number of the sidewalks don't quite go far enough, and they're not on both sides of the street. So trying to extend those sidewalks will be a sort of a long-term commitment. And then developing future bike lanes. Specifically, Bridge Street has a relatively small right-of-way, relatively limited pavement. So striping out a bike lane right now is a little bit uncertain. You'd need a lot more survey information to be able to see if you could pull that off. But right now it does not appear to be, based on some of our preliminary field measurements. But establishing a bike or a walking trail, a dedicated bike lane on North Water Street, it might be possible right now with very limited amount of effort, given the limited amount of traffic and also very few curb cuts. South Water Street, on the other hand, is very narrow, and the right-of-way is extremely small, so that houses are only 5 feet away from the edge of pavement. So you don't have a lot of room to be able to slide in another lane. One of the things we looked at as part of this study was to say, okay, what if we made South Water Street one direction? What if you didn't make South Water Street a through road? Most of that discussion was coordinated with the guys on the Route 5 corridor study, but ultimately was not recommended that a radical change in South Water Street that could have an impact on Main Street and also elsewhere within the Warehouse Point. So it was not pursued. We developed a pedestrian and bike lane master plan that can be used for future development or future grant opportunities, DOT discussions for improvements, since both Main Street and Bridge Street are sorry, went a little fast, DOT controlled. We looked at gateway signs and connections beyond the project area. These were a couple of sketches. I had actually taken this project to one of my classes. I teach as an adjunct at University of Hartford, and I had some student sketches start talking about gateways and a number of different things. So these are sketches from that particular class. And we looked at the possibility of looking at gateways, whether it be a simple sign or a street light with some banners, or as elaborate as you'd like. And those would be located at the bridge, at 91, coming down onto Bridge Street, and potentially out Route 5, onto Route 5 where South Water Street connects through, or where Main Street connects through. Couple of part of the survey also included, and the presentation included, some visualizations for Bridge Street. We were looking to try and see if we could add mixed use buildings on the north side, maintain some of the historic structures, look at shared parking, and no parking in the street. And so we had come up with a number of different images that we also tied in with some concept site plans, just to see what it might look like. How could we keep the architectural style and still show some new development? People did, the survey response, they did like this image. We had 80% plus who felt that they would visit and shop and walk here. They were definitely interested in outdoor dining, and just wanting to make sure that it had that same historic character. On the negative side, people felt that their traffic was already bad there, so why would you want to add more? And that, again, it's not right to take someone's home. So just to be clear that that's not the intent. Development along this area could be done as a group, or could be done on a parcel by parcel basis over time. And it could still develop into something that would look similar to this. In this image, we tried to use slightly different architecture, really sort of focus on topographically, how would we make this work? How does the sidewalk work? The left-hand side has more of a sort of gateway tower element, tried to bring in the brick from elsewhere in Warehouse Point. And on the right-hand side, it's a multi-story sort of retail on the street level, residential above, and parking down below, because this property on the right-hand side drops down significantly. But the real interesting part about this one is that you see this fellow here with his dog. There was a couple of proposals that DOT and Windsor Locks was looking at about the possibility of bringing, taking Jersey barriers in the the pull off lane on the bridge, that it could be used as a dedicated bike lane to get across the bridge, so that the bike was separate from the pedestrians walking across the bridge on this side. And that would not require significant changes to the bridge in any fashion, just a striping issue. So that was one of those things that we had looked at. On this one, we had slightly less interest and positive things, because they weren't really sure that people liked they liked the architecture. It was a little too tall. That had mixed feelings about that. But they did like the fact that it was walkable, that the buildings were at the street, and that it felt like it was consistent with the style of architecture. One of the, from a negative perspective, the questions that came up are, why you're proposing a blueback square style development in Warehouse Point, and that we'd rather be Collinsville versus West Hartford. I think it should be, it's important to note that the amount of square footage that is talking about, or the area that would be occupied by new development on Bridge Street, is extremely limited. I mean, you're talking about probably less than a total of 40,000 square feet, which is extremely small for this particular area. So it's not a blueback style square system. It is something that's much smaller, and a much smaller scale, sort of more suited to Warehouse Point. So how does the town get what everybody wants for future development? This project includes the development of a draft zoning regulation, which defines uses and bulk requirements for each area within Warehouse Point. Those zoning regulations would then need to go through a formal review, public hearings, et cetera, in order to, I'm sure they would get tweaked, and ultimately, in order to ultimately become actually the approved zones for the town. Even when that is established, that provides direction and guidance for new development and new investment, but it does not mandate that something needs to be removed. Here we have the proposed zoning map. You can see that it covers the entire area and starts to reflect where the Planning and Zoning Commission and the survey respondents want to see development focused, which is really along Bridge Street. One of the things that we've done as part of this is to develop a series of streetscape sections showing, what the lawn areas, sidewalks, etc. One of the questions from the survey participants, which is not unexpected, I've done a number of these in East Windsor, so if somebody always asks, which is, this is great, but how are you to pay for it? As this is a planning study, that's not really what comes into play here, but that this planning study would enable you to use maps and the study itself in order to get grants and to coordinate with DOT for such things as iced tea grants for sidewalks improvements, street lights, etc. But the major development is all market driven. So if you go back to the original name of this study, it's the Stormwater and Planning Grant. So what happened to the stormwater portion of this project? We had a number of survey questions that tried to get a sense of what the residents actually experience. We've spent a lot of time, our office has spent a lot of time measuring, taking photos of the blue ditch. So we're very much so aware on an every storm basis over approximately the last 2 years, how the blue ditch functions and what happens. But residents weren't, we had a mixed bag. About 45% agreed that stormwater runoff is a problem. But it was really flooding that they've experienced is really only 22% of the respondents. And a lot of them disagreed. 80% agree that Connecticut River flooding is a regular experience, but the actual blue ditch flooding, not so much. Again, it was only 37%. And a lot of them had no idea what we were talking about. So unless you're right there and your house either backs onto the blue ditch or it somehow affects you on a regular basis, I'm not sure that even neighbors understand what occurs behind people's houses, on the back end of the church, all of those sorts of areas. Around the wastewater treatment plant.
Larry, before you move on, can you go back to slide?
Yeah.
The question in the lower left, the flooding, can you clarify what you're asking there? I think there's a typo in there that significantly changes the meaning.
Okay, well, the statement was flooding, the question was flooding is so bad, we should not do anything in Warehouse Point. We should move all our development elsewhere.
Oh, so it's supposing that flooding is a problem, not flood. I read that in error to be the flooding problems aren't so bad in Warehouse Point. The study should look elsewhere.
Oh, no. So it was, no, the statement was the flooding problems are so bad in Warehouse Point, we should look elsewhere for development. And you either agreed or you disagreed.
Thank you.
So that's, so only 12% agreed. 59% clearly said, no, that's not the case.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. So the next set of questions were really about, how, what people thought about new development and stormwater runoff. Everyone agrees that new development should not increase runoff, and that it should be done in a way that it doesn't impact the downstream neighbors. It was interesting. I'm concerned that new building will result in increased, whoops, got a typo there, increased flooding. 45% agreed, but the 23% who disagreed vehemently disagreed. So that was sort of interesting. Having new business is worth increased runoff. Pretty much 60%, 59% disagreed. And that essentially everyone said, I want both new development and no increased flooding, which was a 68%. So we want both. This question was interesting and I was not expecting the result. The statement was, I'm willing to use tax dollars to reduce flooding at Warehouse Point and elsewhere in town. And 55% of the respondents agreed with that. I did not expect to get that response. So a lot of the questions that came up out of this is, how come you can't just maintain the ditch? Right now, most of the blue ditch is actually located on private property. So the town would need easements in order to maintain it. In addition, the blue ditch is associated with a wetland corridor. So some permitting for maintenance is something that the town needs to look into for the future. We did have a number of questions regarding the Connecticut River. Just to be clear, this study does not address Connecticut River flooding. What we have found and is consistent in the stormwater modeling, the rain that hits Warehouse Point has virtually no impact on the Connecticut River as it goes by. The Connecticut River, on the other hand, as it comes down from Vermont, has a significant impact on Warehouse Point. So right now, whatever we do from a stormwater perspective has no impact on the Connecticut River at all. Some of the things that were looked at as recommendations for future development is looking at what's known as green infrastructure, which is when you increase the amount of hardscape, which is basically pavement and building, that some portion of that would be what's known as pervious pavement, and to look at the addition of rain gardens and water quality improvements versus detention, because for the most part, overall, we want the stormwater to leave this area as quickly as possible. There is a 24 to 48 hour differential between the peak that occurs in the blue ditch in East Windsor and any peak that might occur from the Connecticut River if the storm happened to go up north as well as it hitting in East Windsor. What do I mean by pervious pavement? There are three main categories that are used in this area. There are permeable pavers. It's not that the paver itself is permeable, but the area in between the pavers allows water to discharge through. And that's a fairly common situation. All these images are from the DEP, but I know that our firm has regular experience with all of these. Pervious asphalt, I'm a huge fan of pervious asphalt. This is, we've done a number of shopping centers that have pervious asphalt pavement. Pervious asphalt is basically an asphalt. It's known as an open graded mix from the DOT. It has more holes in it. It's not completely flat, solid, and smooth, and it allows water to go through to a stone base that's underneath. It does a great job. There is sort of long-standing old wives' tales or rumors that somehow we can't use pervious asphalt in cold weather climates. That has been proven to be untrue. And if anybody's really interested, the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center has a lot of updated information and research associated with this. Pervious concrete is also similar. It is a different kind of concrete mix, got a lot more stones in it, so that it's not smooth and all the way through, and allows water to go through on a regular basis. And so those are kind of the main ways of pervious pavement. The downside to pervious pavement, for every benefit that it does from a stormwater perspective, it is expensive. And the cheapest is 30% approximately more than regular asphalt for your pervious asphalt. And then it goes up 50% and then 75% or double for when you start doing pavers. So it gets to be quite expensive. Some of the other things to take into consideration is the use of permeable pavers along the road, the development of street trees, and just a general streetscape infrastructure that helps from a stormwater perspective, but also establishes the look that you're looking for with street lights and benches and bike racks and things like that. So those are things that we're looking at as well. So the new zoning regulation is identifying impervious surface in every area or zone, the new zones in Warehouse Point. One of the things that's different is that the way that it's set up right now, the top of the hill has much higher impervious calculations than the bottom part of the hill. That doesn't work from a stormwater model perspective. It's actually the worst thing that you could do. And so we're looking at the proposed zoning regulation looks at increasing impervious surface along Bridge Street, and then some of the on the higher levels, decreasing the allowed impervious surface up in those areas. Limiting growth along the Connecticut River, and making sure that the flood regulations get connected to the zoning regulation, because there seems to be a disconnect right now. One of the things that we looked at, especially South Water Street, is because of the Connecticut has done a number of air-flown topography and tied it into the FEMA base maps, we are able to sort of visualize what would happen. South Water Street is basically at elevation 30. The current base flood elevation for Warehouse Point between the Bridge Street and 91 is approximately 35 feet. It's a little bit less than 35 feet as you get towards the wastewater treatment plant, but let's say for arguments purposes, it's 35 feet. So if South Water Street is at elevation 30, base flood elevation would be at approximately 35 feet. So the base flood elevation represents what was formerly known as the 100-year flood. So there would be has the potential to be approximately 5 feet of water over South Water Street. So one of the questions that come into play is what would you do in order to flood proof your home? The current flood regulations in the town of East Windsor say that if you had damage and you substantially improve your structure greater than 25%, then you have to meet the flood regulations. And the flood regulations mean that you would then set your floor elevation for your finished floor elevation a foot above the base flood elevation. So essentially that would then be approximately 6 feet higher than what the current finished floor for these particular areas are. So when we start looking at that, you start to realize that something different would have to happen. You can see a lot of this kind of construction occurring along the shore because a lot of that new construction now needs to meet the new flood regulations. So one of the questions that people were having, well, was what does that look like? Well, you know, what could that possibly mean? And so we had prepared a vision for what that might look like if you actually lifted, because it doesn't do you any good really from a construction perspective to lift it up 6 feet. But what if you lifted it all up 8 feet so that you were able to drive underneath and park in the back and have access through the building? What would it mean to lift up those structures? So this image was prepared in order to sort of address that question. The interesting thing was that survey respondents, they liked this. It was about 68% of people liked the look and the architecture. We actually went through, I don't know, dozens of images from all over Connecticut, looking at housing types and some of the architecture. And the survey respondents felt that this was probably a good way to limit flood damage. As much as this is a good solution, the difficulty is, you know, cost, and also there are a number of important historic structures along South Water Street that lifting those up or doing something different it wouldn't really apply. Some of the comments regarding the proposed, you know, that image were interesting. There were comments that said people chose to live on South Water Street knowing that there was a flood risk, and so why should we help them? There were issues mentioning the smells from the wastewater treatment plant, and the paper mill was enough to keep the respondent off a river walk or walking down South Water Street. Then again, we had lots of comments about it is really nice to walk along South Water Street and look at the river. The river is nice through the seasons. A couple final thoughts from the survey results was that, you know, again, outdoor dining kept coming up, maintain the existing architecture, maintain the village look, but we do need something. And they know changes is coming at some point, and they'd like to see things that are electric vehicle friendly, dog and family friendly. We did get a number of responses that said, stop talking about everything, just do something. Okay, we've been talking about it for a long time, so we'd really like to see something done. A couple of things, cleaning up blighted properties. Again, that came up on another time or more than once. One interesting comment was something about needing a pickup area in Warehouse Point itself. If you don't have a car and you're trying to encourage people to be transit oriented, all of a sudden recycling pickup and garbage pickup starts to become an area of concern. I think that's, yep. Were there any issues identified that would affect future or existing quality of life? There were a few, the homelessness, the buildings in disrepair, no activity in certain parts of Bridge Street, that, you know, public activity, truck traffic. Like I said, most people were not convinced that anybody would want to start or open a business in town, and they'd really like to see the speed limit reduced on South Water Street. I think I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll just start off by thanking you for your good work on this project over, what I think is 3 years. Certainly, it feels like it's been quite some time. The work clearly speaks for itself, and it's a very thorough, well put together presentation. Any members of the Selectmen have questions or comments? Marie? Marie, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I can't believe people weren't interested in the fact that Blue Ditch floods the recreational area down on Water Street, the ball fields. It really gets bad back there and around the water pollution control area. That surprises me. But in looking at your renditions, the Veterans Memorial area, I think it was excluded from there, and I don't know if that will be a problem moving forward on any of these recommendations.
No,
And
all those images only went from the bridge, the intersection of Water Street to what's known as the Bridge Street Collective. So it never got up.
It never
Bridge
happened.
Street. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I saw the stop sign, so that's what confused me. So you're right at that, right over the crossover from the bridge.
Yeah.
All right. And then I understand, listening to the planning and zoning, meeting, this past week, you're going to be reaching out to the Broadbrook, the Warehouse Point Fire Department on some renovation changes there to see if it
Yeah.
fits the plan.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Al?
Yeah, I'd like to first echo Jason's comments to say thank you. I know you've done a ton of work and paid a lot of attention to detail on this over the years. And and now you finally come to the end of it, which you might be happy about. I don't know.
I don't know that I could do another project.
Okay. I just wanted to make one kind of quick comment. I had two businesses and a couple of residents ask me when the revitalization was going to begin. So it was, explained that, this is really going to end up in a zone map change and hopefully, that would invite development. And that actually leads to my actual question. And I see there's a Joe on, and I don't know if that's Joe Ouellette or not, but what is the timeline, for the zone map changes? Is it something we think will finish in 2021, sooner than that, or?
It hasn't, from my perspective, it hasn't been brought up yet because there's a formal process. So once they get the final version, then they would have to start that. So that would be put into the Planning and Zoning Commission's hands then.
Alan, are you good?
Yep, that's me.
I'm sorry, Charlie or Sarah?
Yeah, great job, Terry. I think you did excellent work with, reaching out to local businesses and community members and getting opinion and the feel for, what's important to the residents. It kind of is a shame that this could be the end and a dead end too. I hope these come to fruition with, the zoning board. And again, it's not an overnight flick of the switch change in which, we'll see dramatic changes in buildings. It's time and years of redevelopment, which in the end could really show little difference because by the time you get the last building done, now the initial building that actually followed the plan needs to be repaired and the study needs to be done all over again. But nonetheless, great job. Living in the section of town, I'm really ambitious to see it come to fruition and actually get executed. There are a lot of blighted properties in town. There are a lot of changes I think that could be made to really improve downtown Warehouse Point that really does have a lot to offer. I also was speaking to some of the heads at Geisler Supermarket about your study as well, and telling them about how much the public appreciates them being here and really supports the fact that they're here. And despite the fact that they're not a huge supermarket, the community really leans on them to be there, when you need that quick item or the convenience of what they offer. So they were happy to hear about that as well. But yes, thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I'd like to echo my fellow board members' comments and thank you for your work on this. I've been following your dialogue with planning and zoning, and there's a lot of options that could really add to the village of Warehouse Point, and I'm interested to see how it will progress forward. And thank you for the survey. We were able to see some other issues like the blighted properties and other areas that may need addressing. So thank you very much for your work on this.
Any other questions or comments for Terry? So Terry, what are the next steps?
For me, it is to just deliver the final report. And then that report gets shuttled to DECD, and then DECD closes out the funding. So that from our perspective, that's our end. What really needs to happen next, I think, is the planning and zoning looks at moving forward with the proposed zone and the proposed zoning map. You might want to think about looking at the possibility of striping out a bike lane on North Water Street. That's kind of a simple something that the town could actually do. But really, there are a number of other recommendations that are kind of both short-term and long-term. One of the things that we are recommending is potentially that the town works with the property owners that have the blue ditch on their property and develop potential easements so that you can get in and actually maintain the culverts and cleaning some of that stuff out. So really it's just a question that I would throw out to you guys, which is, do you, as the board, do you guys feel that the town wants to or is interested in sort of alleviating some of those concerns, those maintenance concerns of those property owners to help the water just go through? That's more of a town policy question, I think, at this point, because the blue ditch does have an impact from a flooding perspective. Does it have an impact on areas that might have future development? Not directly, but every time you add impervious surface, then you have the potential to increase the amount of water going into that ditch. So, there's a balance associated with that.
Thank you. If there's nothing further for Terry, I'd return to the proper call of the agenda and ask that we take up agenda item 9C, which is the demonstration of a real estate web tool. Can I have a motion?
Marie D'Souza will make a motion to go back into order to new business 9C.
Is there a second?
Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I'll second.
All in favor, Selectman Baker? Selectman Baker votes yes. Selectman Nordell?
Aye.
Selectman Muska?
Aye.
And Selectman D'Souza?
Aye.
This is a project that I've asked the planning department to undertake for quite some time. And there were a couple of stops and starts, but when Mike D'Amato and I sat down, when he joined us as interim planner, he took this and really ran with it and developed it into something that I think has some potential. The thought behind this was to demonstrate to commercial real estate agents that the town of East Windsor wants to be partners with them and that we're open for business. And so Mike and I brainstormed a couple of ideas about how to do that. And then we reached out to some commercial real estate, actually some real estate agents in the community when Mike had an initial, I'll call it a beta version of this to show to them to make sure that we were going down the right path here and that this is something that would actually be beneficial to them. So before I turn it over to Mike, I want to thank Josh and Becky Colonies for their feedback, Jay Madigan for his, Chris Davis for being a part of this, and Bill Arts. Those are the folks who helped us kind of kick the tires a little bit. And hopefully we'll have something that's going to be beneficial and help market commercial opportunities within the community. So Mike, I'm going to turn this to you. Show us what you've come up with, and we'll take any questions or comments from the board.
Sure, thanks. So I guess what I'll start with is, and Jay summarized it pretty well, the goal of this is to provide them with something that is different than just simply putting a listing on, LoopNet or Zillow or wherever a commercial real estate's, listings live these days. But, one of the things that happens is a property goes, get put on the market, and they'll advertise, it's a 50-acre parcel, it's commercially zoned, and someone may be interested in it, but that's, about as far as the conversation can go unless they have information that is kept by our office. So the goal was to put in their hands in a way that was easy to consume, tailored information that allows that first conversation to build some momentum so that they feel confident with continuing the conversation with staff and have information to make decisions. In those discussions with the realtors that we had, we basically took notes and tried to present the information in a way that was easy for them to share with their clients, but also tried to provide them with some information to go on. So the first thing I'm going to show you, Jay, will I be able to share my screen? Yep. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay.
You have our agenda up though.
Yep. I know. I'm just pulling everything up here. Okay. So we have something on our website right now, basically, which is where the listings come in. So we have a little bit of an introductory statement. This is the link to get to it. And this is a web form that we've created so that the realtors can submit the parcels for listing. So they will provide that information. They have the opportunity to submit photos or links to the listing, which we then capture. It comes to us through the website in an Excel document, which we then can take and populate into the data table that will project on the website I'm going to show you. We've changed this a little bit to reflect what we think is important, but also we do not want this to be cumbersome or demanding on the realtor, because then they won't use it. So when you click on this, it's a hyperlink. It will bring you to the map. Because we don't have, we basically are just getting this off the ground. We've populated some in here that are basically just tests so you can see it. But this is what it will look like from the public's perspective. The properties that are listed will pop up. You'll see on the left-hand side that there's different colors, which we're categorizing based on the type of property. And we can change all of that as necessary. I've added a few important points based on the feedback we got, specifically related to the exits, because that's important for commercial and industrial access. And then basically what you'll see here are all the individual pieces. And as you zoom in, the addresses will display. This is a Google map, so it's very easy for them to grab it and link it to their phone and get directions if they want to go to the site. But when you click on it, you'll be provided with the information, some of which we've captured and some of which we've provided as part of that second step. So you'll see obviously price, contact information, in some of the zoning designations. We've indicated on the bottom here that we have a site plan for the property, and then we've gone ahead and attached it as a photo. We can't link PDFs, unfortunately. So they have that, and they can use that to make those decisions. So we're trying to go a step further by giving them information that they wouldn't necessarily have, like a site plan. The other thing that we did was we pulled out all of the separate zoning categories for commercial and industrial zones in town, and we created specific documents for each, which we're linking to here from our website, which is listed as permitted uses. I'll show you that in a second. And then just above that, known property limitations. This is where we'll indicate if there are flood zones on the property, if there are wetlands, if it's in an aquifer protection or historic district, something they need to know. So then they can click on this and it will load this document, which will very quickly and easily show them what they can do as a permitted use, what needs a special permit use, and the specific requirements if they're interested in citing a building, setbacks, and that type of thing. It's something you can get on your phone. And again, we hope to be able to continue to populate this. The other thing that it will provide, if it has success, is we will end up with an Excel database that will show us all these properties over time that have gone on the market, come off the market, what they've gone for, who the contact person was, what the price was, the uses, the zone. So that will give us an idea of what's going on as we continue to build this data table on the back end. And I guess with that, I'll stop and take any questions or comments or concerns.
So I'll kick it off by just saying, now that we have the structure in place, I had a conversation earlier today with the IT manager for the Connecticut Realtors Association, and he did express interest in what we're trying to develop. And as I said in the beginning, the intention here is to show prospective businesses that the town is interested in being partners with them. And this is just another attempt on our part to say that we're open for business and we would like them to consider us. So I think we've done a great job of generating, what my original thought had been, and really the product he came up with is better than what I articulated to him. So I thank him for his work on this. Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Alan? Oh,
Let Sarah go first.
Sarah?
Or Sarah Muska, Selectmen. Thank you very much for doing this. I think anything that we can do to promote ourselves as a town and let businesses know that we're open for business is great, especially where you click and see the different zones and the requirements and things for that property. So if they're looking to do something that might not be viable there, they can move on. I think that's good. But is there additional costs associated with setting this up? I was just curious on that.
Yeah, so this has all been done free. There's no cost to the town. So we can maintain all of this. It's staff in the planning and development office does this on the back end. There's no hosting, there's no limits, totally free. That was a key point I meant to mention because I know that's super important, right? We don't know if it's going to work. Oh, by the way, we spent $5,000. No, not the case.
Thank you.
So one of the suggestions that was raised with me by my contact at the Realtors Association is to also, and Mike doesn't know about this yet, so this is coming, to shop this around to CCM and CROG as well, to help. So as useful and well, as useful as this tool really will be, it's going to be limited by the number of people who use it. So we need to make sure that we're spreading the word. And the natural place to start, we thought, was with the Realtors Association. These are people who are trying to sell properties. But I'm going to reach out also to CCM and to CROG to show what we're developing and to see if there's a way of integrating their resources into this too. So we'll see what happens. But it's not a beta. This is live. It's ready to go. But we're still trying to make sure that we can build out the usefulness of it. And because it's done in-house, if there are opportunities or suggestions that are raised to improve or adaptable, there's opportunity here to do a little bit more if somebody has an idea that we haven't thought of. But the first thought between Mike and I was to engage those people who would ideally be using it to see if we could get their suggestions up front. Other questions or comments?
All I got to say is that's fantastic. You guys did a great job.
It's fun. It's been a long time coming, but to actually see it come to bear is really, hopefully it works.
And I think just a sort of a side point, one of the things you hear from commercial developers and folks that are interested in getting things approved at the local level on the commercial industrial side, that is daunting and will cause them to shy away from towns is a volatile land use environment. Not knowing what they're walking into and what support they have and is not worth they'll go to their plan B and their plan C if it means they're going to be welcomed and they're going to know what's in front of them. And this starts that conversation off on the right foot because they know that we've put in this effort to show them that we are around and available. And so I think the optics of having something like this available, even if it doesn't get widely used, if people know that we've done it, I think it still continues that overall climate that we want to work with people.
Marie, you're muted.
Sorry. I think what it also does, it puts everything that people would spend hours researching all in the palm of their hand. So as far as real estate personnel are concerned, they don't have to come in when a piece of property comes in and do all kinds of research. They can just pop up that and get everything that's necessary so that they can start moving forward. So I think that'll save a lot of time for people. So kudos for doing that. Nice job. I like it. I think the Economic Development Commission needs to see that. So,
Yeah, I wanted to bring it to you guys first, but the next step is to share it with them
Yep.
until the beginning of February. But this is one of our projects, so it rightly comes to you guys first.
yep, I agree. But nice job. Thanks, Jay.
Other questions or comments? Thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight. I know you were juggling a couple of meetings, so I appreciate that.
No problem. And if anybody has questions or comments or has an aha moment of how we can make it better, just reach out.
Thank you.
Next is Kathy.
Chair Muska, Selectmen, I'll move to approve the tax refunds totaling $8,297.31.
Is there a second?
Selectman Nordell will second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Selectman Baker,
Aye.
Selectman Nordell,
Aye.
Selectman Muska,
Aye.
and Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Selectmen's reports. I don't have too much this week. We're doing. I'm working on my budget presentation to you all in a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks. So that really is the bulk of the time. You'll get quite an earful on that on February 4th. But I did want to start. I wanted to take a moment to welcome Clark Chapin as the Town of East Windsor's new Director of Planning and Development. Today was Clark's first day, and he's hit the ground running. As you guys know, he comes to us with more than 2 decades of experience in local, state, and federal government, and he has a master's degree in community planning. With Clark on board, joining Ruth Ann, Amanda, Peg, and Mike, I am really confident that department is in a place that it can help East Windsor grow in a positive direction. We've reiterated the customer-friendly focus. I think we all expect our departments to deliver, and I'm excited for our new team to now be complete and to get to work. The other 2 things I wanted to share is that tomorrow is police accreditation inspection day at the police department. Our department has been working for a very long time for tomorrow's events. I'm sure they're going to be successful. But I wanted us to extend our best wishes to them as they go through that process. Lastly, the only other thing of note that I would share is that today, Senator Murphy's office reached out to us to discuss ways that they can be supportive of local economic development. So the conversation dovetails nicely into really what all of tonight's meeting has been about. The areas that we talked about were the potential for an infrastructure package coming out of the federal government, if that does come to be, wanting to make sure that we were in a position to capitalize on that. Last time the feds did something like that was, well, large scale, was the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, ARA, back in 2009. Then Vice President Biden was the guy who managed that. And so I'm optimistic that there will be opportunity there. And I put a marker down with the senator's office that, as opportunities present themselves, to please keep us in the loop. So that was kind of the gist of that conversation. But I just wanted to share those couple of updates and let you know that I think at our next meeting is when I'll be doing, no, the 2 days before our next meeting is when I'll be doing my official budget presentation to you all. So we'll start workshopping that shortly thereafter. Selectman D'Souza.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. On January 11th, I met with First Selectman Jason Bowser and Planning and Zoning Official Ruth Ann Calabrese regarding membership numbers with the Economic Development Commission. I also attended a Zoom meeting with the Park and Recreation Commission. Several items were discussed. The Park and Recreation Department is currently required to follow the governor's executive orders. Low-risk sports are allowed, but due to COVID-19 restrictions, the ice skating rink was constructed only 4 utilize it at a time. Therefore, it has been decided to hold off at this time. A review as weather and time permits will take place for reevaluation at a later date. Plans are in place to hire staff for a potential opening of the East Windsor Park, aka the reservoir, the second week of June. All fees are remaining the same as the previous summer. The East Windsor Dog Park maintenance will now be handled by Park and Rec due to a request of the East Windsor Dog Committee. January 2021 activity calendar was submitted. I encourage our community to visit their website at www.eastwindsorrec.com for scheduled programs. January 12th, I listened on to the Planning and Zoning meeting via Zoom. On January 20th, the East Windsor Housing Authority meeting was canceled and is rescheduled for January 27th at 7 o'clock. That's all I have.
Thank you. Charlie.
Good evening. On January 13th, I attended the police commissioners meeting. Due to rising costs in police vehicles, the department is approximately $14,000 shy for purchasing and outfitting their vehicles for this year. Thanks to some scheduling help from the Ambulance Association, the police department has most of its employees through their first round of COVID vaccinations. Commissioner Philippone had mentioned he read on Facebook a resident reporting the dog pound doesn't have heat, which is not a true statement. Our dog pound does have heat, and in fact, it received a new furnace a couple of years ago, but it does need many renovations that have been passed off year after year unfunded. 2 years ago, the citizens of town voted down a proposal to eliminate our pound and merge with South Windsor. This shows that keeping the pound in town is important to residents, and therefore we should find the funds this budget season to make that happen. On January 14th, attended the East Windsor PTO meeting. We mostly discussed ideas for upcoming fundraisers. Despite COVID-19 restrictions, I feel we have devised some great ideas for upcoming fundraisers while keeping everyone socially distant. The East Windsor Trolley Museum received a $5,000 grant from the Connecticut Cares Small Business Grant to help with the operating budget due to the hit they received from the pandemic. The Trolley Museum has also received some generous help in supplies and work being done by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers 42. They are new to town and have a facility on Craftsman Road. I would like to thank them for their generosity and immediate involvement in town. It's great to see such a great alliance working so well here in town. The Geisler Supermarket family suffered the loss of Mary Nielsen on January 16th. Having worked with them for 26 years, I can attest to her kindness and always pleasant attitude. She will be missed by her family and the Geisler's community. My condolences go out to all of them. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Charlie. Sarah.
On January 13th, I attended the Board of Education meeting that was held on Zoom. High school principal Allison Anderson updated the board on current happenings at the high school, focusing on student engagement. Safe school leaders are currently giving the morning announcements, creating themes for each day, and the student newsletter will be highlighting departments monthly, with English being the focus in January. Librarian Marissa Tazzanieri implemented Uber Reads and curbside pickup, placing books by the cafeteria to encourage students to pick up a book and read. The library introduces a new theme of library materials each week, taking reservations during lunch waves and delivering to students and staff during G period. Teachers and students have been preparing for upcoming assessments. Midterms are approaching quickly at the end of this month, as well as the iReady assessment for 9th and 10th graders, and SATs are scheduled for April 13th. NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, will be visiting school staff virtually between March 21st and March 24th. Currently, the Board of Education budget for the current fiscal year is in good standing and is in the positive $269,000. The FRC grant was also recently approved. A curriculum report was given by Daryl Rouliard and East Windsor Middle School Assistant Principal Linda Deutsch, focusing on illustrative math. This program ties into the Portrait of a Graduate, encouraging students to be curious, motivated, problem solvers, open-minded, critical thinkers, reflective, and clear communicators. The district continues to navigate through challenges arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and is preparing for vaccinating staff in the near future. There has also been some discussion regarding school pictures, and that is hopefully going to be rescheduled for the spring. Last night, I attended the Board of Finance meeting that was also on Zoom. The Silverman Group's building permit totaling $204,000 was taken in. The building department has taken in $238,000 of their budgeted $250,000 so far for this fiscal year. Tax collection continues to be heading in the right direction with no issues at this time. A discussion took place regarding the fiscal year 2019-2020 variance in interfund accounts in the amount of $353,000. The auditor stated in a memo to the Board of Finance that the district, town, and auditor are continuing to investigate the issue. Discussion took place between Board of Finance members that if necessary, the variance could be taken from the surplus funds reported by the Board of Education, which would reduce the 2% fund. The superintendent shared that school business staff and she are extremely interested in resolving the variance and are continuing to review the accounts. I did follow up with Board of Education Chairman Catherine Simonelli today and was informed that according to the auditor this morning, the variance has been identified as payments that were properly reflected as revenue in the school district's ledger, but not initially identified as being receivables. Mrs. Simonelli informed me that they will be able to move forward with finalizing their financial statements, and there will be no adjustments to the expenditure surplus that is being reported by the school district. And then I just talked about our upcoming budget process and how there will be a public hearing on February 2nd. And I highly encourage the public to attend and talk to the board about what they'd like to see included in this budget. Thank you.
Alan.
Yeah, so the planning and zoning had a public hearing that was well attended by the public. It was about a property on Depot Street getting rezoned from residential. Currently, it's an approved housing development, I think something like 56 units. So they were trying to change the zoning to multifamily district. And they had previously shown the Planning and Zoning Commission a mock-up of what they potentially would like to propose as an application, which was a condominium complex of about 150 units. So, they did not, they were very adamant about saying they had not put any plan in at this point in time, and they were just looking for a zone change to multifamily, but they did actually prior show what they were looking to do. So there was a lot of, there was basically nobody for it in the audience whatsoever. And the hearing was continued until next week. And I know most of you were there. So we'll pick that back up this Tuesday coming up. And I'm sure they'll come to some sort of resolution on that.
There's been a steady stream of correspondence coming through my office and the planning office since last Tuesday.
I'm not surprised.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Public participation. There are a couple of folks who I can't identify on the call or on the meeting. If anybody would like to address the board, I'd welcome your comments. Seeing none. We will have a brief executive session. Peg, I do expect that there will be a vote, one vote afterwards. So I'll get the video up as quickly as I can.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to go into executive session to include just the 5 of us pursuant to the purpose listed on the agenda.
Marie D'Souza moved that we go into executive session as stated.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
We are in executive session at 8:41. 9:27, we're coming out of executive session. Is there any further business to come before the board?
Yes, Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I move that the discussion and approval of a lease termination and a new lease agreement between the town of East Windsor and Reichley Farms LLC, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the agreement.
So before that, let's add that as an agenda item.
Sorry. Okay.
Just a discussion of town-owned farm leases.
Okay, I move to add added agenda item, the discussion and of an approval of a lease termination and a new lease agreement.
That'll be listed in the minutes as agenda item 9F. The motion is to add agenda item 9F. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Sarah, seconded by Alan. Any discussion? Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
And Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Now we'll take up agenda item 9F. Selectman Muska, you have the floor.
Okay, I move to approve a lease termination and a new lease agreement between the town of East Windsor and Reichley Farms LLC, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the document.
Is there a second?
Selectman Nordell will second that.
Any discussion? I would just state for the record that I will add the documents to the meeting minutes for public view, and that I think that both the termination and the amended lease are going to be beneficial to both the town and to the leaseholder. And I think this is a good way of moving forward to benefit the whole community. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion has been made and seconded. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Motion clearly passes. Is there any further business to come before the Board of Selectmen? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Selectman Nordell will move to adjourn our regular meeting at 9:30 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second, Marie D'Souza.
Motion has been made and seconded. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 9:30 p.m. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.